Daddy.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second round of the coffee run. This is Harrison Starr on the count, joined quickly here by Thad Nelson. Thad, how are you doing? Did the auto mute get you, Thad, or are you ramping on?
I'm back now. Just when it joins, sometimes it cuts out for a little bit. So when it allowed me access to speak, so yeah, I'm in the middle of my coffee run right now, just waiting for them to make it for me. It was a bit of a long night. We've got two little ones that aren't feeling the best, so it's that back to school sickness spreading around. I have a feeling. So it was very little sleep. So an extra shot of espresso got to get me going this morning.
Oh no, that was kind of me last week. Elliot's got more juice now. He's playing with maybe the loudest toy possible. So if that's what folks hear in the background, that's what it is. So Thad, I was kind of going back and thinking about my conversation with Ben earlier this week, and we really didn't talk about much of the nuts and bolts of this Iowa State team. And I think maybe I was sharing some emails with a friend, and he said the drop off from Bobby Petrino to Brian Ferentz, could it be any steeper for these Iowa State defensive coaches to prepare for?
Oh man, thank you. That's a great question. They is the hard part about trying to defend Iowa just being like, well, it doesn't really matter if we stop that. So are we going to care about it? Like, what are you actually going to care about trying to stop? Because most of it right now probably doesn't matter. And if you throw in the fact that I haven't looked at the forecast exactly for Iowa City, but if it's anything like here, it's going to be a wet day. Um, I just, what do you do to even prepare? What matters when you start looking at it as a defensive coach getting ready to play Iowa?
For me, especially with Iowa State, it's probably how do you occupy as many offensive linemen with as few defensive linemen as possible. And when I think about that, it's how will they be able to isolate Will McDonald? Because he's, as we saw last year, that was kind of the one of many Achilles heels for Iowa, but being able to generate a pass rush with a George Karlaftis or a Aiden Hutchinson just blew up whatever Iowa wanted to do. And Will McDonald has that kind of pedigree. He's a little slighter than both of those two that I mentioned, but that doesn't make him any less capable as a pass rusher.
Yeah, and you watch week one and you don't get a good feeling about what Iowa has at tackle right now in terms of handling somebody like that. My guess, from an Iowa standpoint, is you probably think, well, we'll just try to run at him a bunch. But I have a feeling, like you said, Iowa State's going to try to do some things to isolate him, whether that's bringing pressure nearby, so kind of bringing a blitzer, bringing somebody that's there so he can't be chipped maybe by a tight end or by a running back, or you can bring pressure on the other side and force the tackle to go one-on-one. It's a little bit of out of Iowa State's character. Really they'd prefer to be able to drop 7 or 8, um, and Iowa you know would probably prefer them to do that in terms of uh, giving the line a little bit of extra time, but also to help with the run game. So I'm with you. I think they're trying to figure out what are the ways that they can get him opportunities to get as many one-on-one scenarios as possible. Because to this point, there's no evidence that Iowa is going to block him effectively in those situations.
And the other thing you mentioned it is, what do they do on the back end? That Bill Connolly had his box score for Iowa, and like trying to go through it, it was like, is there any positive to take in when you talk about the passing game? And it's like somehow I think South Dakota State only ran man coverage maybe 4 times. Iowa completed 1 pass, and you think that's ugly, and then you see, oh, it's really no prettier when South Dakota State just dropped a ton of people into this zone. And I think that's really got to be what Iowa State's hoping to do is, hey, if we can just make Petrus take time, or whoever Iowa has as quarterback, there's maybe, the way the week played out, it seemed like maybe Petrus has a shorter lease than we all kind of think, which would make more sense. But I think the longer that you can force Iowa's quarterback to think back there, the better shape you're going to be from pretty much every perspective.
Oh, definitely. And there's, you start dropping guys, and we've watched Petrus get hesitant. He sees guys in the zones. I mean, he's forced a few as well, but I think it causes him to think more than what. Okay, you see pressure. I've got a hot route. Uh, with his accuracy issues, I think if you're an Iowa State defender or game planning, yeah, make him throw into those windows, make him see a bunch of defenders. And honestly, you can probably get pressure with just 3 or 4 guys most of the time. South Dakota State was getting pressure and was blowing up the run game, which is, to me, the bigger issue was the run game with just 4-man fronts and, not doing anything too crazy. They did bring some boundary pressure quite a bit. That's something they like to do with their corners. And Iowa, wasn't able to take advantage of that. The one time they saw it, kind of a blitz from the secondary, they threw a hot route, but it got deflected at the line of scrimmage. But Iowa State, I think, can just do exactly what they want to do, which is just sit back, rush 3 or 4, and then just flood the zone with players. And that includes against Iowa's run game, keeping those guys off the line of scrimmage so that let those 3 or 4 guys eat up the 5 to 6 blockers and everybody else just flow to the ball.
Yeah, you transition nicely to that. I think the thing about Iowa's run game is maybe the first question is, does Gavin Williams make a difference? And I know maybe in the straight ahead run game, probably not. But I'm wondering if today's going to be super interesting in my perspective to see how Kirk Ferentz kind of plays it out. Does he not a win at all cost type of game, but is it the type of game that forces Iowa to think creatively? And I think maybe Gavin Williams as a Wildcat back, he does have the throw from the Big Ten championship game, so that's an arrow in his quiver that maybe it would be something creative we see from Iowa, or am I being too optimistic with that, Thad?
Oh, I definitely think that's an option in the playbook. I believe it was that same game, or maybe it was the bowl game where we saw him line up at Wildcat one time. It might have been the bowl game, and then there was a false start, so it ended up not being an option for them to go that route. But I definitely think that's in the run game. The thing I think that Gavin Williams is going to help bring in this game is when you have, I thought rewatching over the summer, rewatching the bowl game, just having the combination of the two Williams and they're both being really physical, keeping them fresh is so important. I thought that's something in the bowl game when LaShawn came in. He just brought so much pop to his pads because he had fresh legs. And those two were rotating and staying very fresh. Where, as in the South Dakota State game, he's 20 plus carries. It's a hot day. It's just a little bit harder to stay as physical and to get some of those broken tackles because he's wearing down as well. You want to wear down the defense, but he's taking a lot of punishment as well. So I think having both of them in there and being able to rotate those carries does help Iowa in terms of keeping those guys fresh and letting their physicality work its way out. And if it's a slippery field or wet jerseys, making those arm tackles a little bit more difficult could at least, I was joking, could lead to an explosive run of like 8 to 12 yards.
Yeah, I think that's the concern is what does an explosive run end up meaning? But I do think Gavin Williams' presence is huge if he is able to go to Gay. It seemed like throughout the week that's how he was trending. And I do think what he brings in the run game is that like speed to the outside. I think LaShawn, I think he's kind of more of an interior back, the guy you want to use more on inside zone, but Gavin Williams being that really got that guy who's very quick to the edge on the run game. And that would be something that Iowa needs to use effectively. As you said, kind of at the top of this, do you try and run it? Will McDonald wear him down? And if Gavin Williams is able to go, that's definitely, what I expect we'll see Iowa do.
I think that's a great point, being able to allow him to get outside a little bit more. And if there is a crease, being able to exploit that a little bit better. He's not going to necessarily be a total game breaker, but I do believe he has a little bit more speed and can help break those outside zone plays. I also think, and Iowa used LaShawn last week a little bit in the pass game, just kind of as a release valve swing out guy. But I think Gavin Williams brings you that, and maybe even a little bit more. I've always felt like when you watch him, he catches the ball very naturally out of the backfield. And maybe that's a spot where Iowa can utilize him as well as in the screen game. You mentioned, what do you do at Will McDonald? Well, I think you try to run at him, and I'd be trying to get one or two early in the game running back screen plays. I know Petras has kind of struggled with that throw over his tenure, but it's something I would put in there just to try to keep him from getting upfield quite as quickly as he wants to in the traditional pass rush.
Yeah, I think that the screen game is just so important, Thad. I think that's where it comes down to like execution, right? You had shared in the Slack, the screenshots of that first one that they had where it was the fake one direction, and then it had LaShawn there with nothing but green in front of him. And those are the types of plays that when Iowa draws up, it is just so important that they hit on them, because they seem so far and few between, in the sense that when they're kind of trick plays, right, Thad? Like, I hate to be overly like simplistic with it, but at least in the sense of Iowa football, that's the type of stuff that when you roll out, you got to hit at a close to 100%.
100%. And Iowa even used misdirection with it. You mentioned Petras with the fake, but they also sent Dunker, who was playing right guard. They actually sent him sprinting downfield. It would have been an obvious man downfield. He was like 8 yards downfield on the opposite side of the field, but they sent him sprinting out to the opposite direction to draw the linebackers across. It was a wonderful play design, and it's one as a coach, the guys who are up in the box have to be thinking as it's just starting to unfold, like, we just called the perfect play, it's a touchdown. And of course, then it just falls incomplete. And we've seen issues in the screen game in the past from Petras. So, as you said, you just have to hit on those. Those are so important that this offense can't afford to waste those opportunities, because and it's also kind of a frustration I have with Brian is I think he has some creative play calls. I just don't think he goes to them enough. I think he saves them sometimes too long until they're perfect. And the team doesn't always need the perfect call. They just need an advantageous call more often, instead of saving it until the perfect time.
More advantageous calls more often. I think that's a great way to put it, Thad. Transitioning to Iowa State's offense against Iowa's defense. And as you kind of said, like, I think the quarterback rhetoric is just like overshadowing just how great Iowa's defense was. And I think if you're Iowa State, you have to feel really good about Hunter Dekkers and Xavier Hutchinson. And to me, it's just a huge strength on strength matchup. And that's why as I will be for 10 more weeks after today, excited as much as anything is just seeing this Iowa defense go up against what looks like a very formidable kind of passing offense.
This defense And as you mentioned, I had mentioned it. It did totally get overshadowed by all the quarterback talk, but it was everything and more that I was expecting to see, and I think most people were expecting to see. Uh, they just dominated in every sense. New guys came in, so you're like, oh well, we'll see what Roberts does at corner filling in. We'll see what Schulte does. We'll see what Cooper DeJean does as his role expanded too. And you left that game, and all three of those guys, you were just like, they were amazing. If you're going to list who the top four most impressive players were for Iowa defensively, I think those three, along with Jack Campbell, are the four that most people would have listed as far as really standing out during that game. As you mentioned, total strength on strength. This Iowa defense is something special in that they can do it from everywhere, and that they're able to rotate so many guys on the defensive line is so important. Now, we did hear that YA Black is going to miss some time with a broken foot, so that does affect him in a little bit up front. But I think what that probably means is we just see less of Lucas Van Ness at defensive end, which is a bummer for me. But it is a spot Iowa is very deep. But we'll just probably see him slide inside a lot more. But when you talk about, Deckers was so impressive in that game, and I've just been really impressed with him when I watched like his high school film when he was being recruited and Iowa State landed him. He's slimmed down a bunch, but they didn't really have him running much. So I don't know if that was just not to give anything away, but I have to imagine he'd be used a little bit in the run game as well. But that connection he has with Hutchinson, those two, I mean, they're going to target him a ton, and he's going to get his catches and get his yards. You just have to make sure that he doesn't break any really big ones, and that on third down, you just try to bracket him as much as possible. But they're going to get some good plays. Deckers is a really big guy, so even if it is a rainy day, I think he's not really going to have any issues spinning the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Hutchinson's just so fascinating to me because I still go back to like Kirk Ferentz in one press conference. He was like, if I wanted to run an offense to guarantee a high completion percentage, I would. And that's kind of what Iowa State does. Like, they're going to get Hutchinson got the ball 8 times, 3 touchdowns in the first half last week. And they're going to get it to him in a variety of areas. And as you said, Iowa has dudes all over. So I don't think they're going to necessarily struggle tackling him, but with him being so big, that emphasis on getting there and gang tackling, swarm tackling is going to be even, higher than usual.
Absolutely, and I mentioned earlier, if it's a wet day, you get defenders slipping, you get a wet jersey. You just have to really make sure that you wrap up and get through him. I do feel pretty good. The secondary for Iowa traditionally is really good in that. It's not a group that just wants to cover and get an interception. They're willing, able and willing tacklers. Really, all of them with this group. Moss gets a lot of credit for what he does in coverage, but I think one of his best skills is his ability to tackle, especially near the line of scrimmage on those quick passes. He's super effective in those areas, and being able to get to the guy and get him down. To me, the area that I'm interested to see with that also is Iowa State able to generate any concepts for any of the other guys? Obviously, Iowa's going to key on him. So what can they do to get some of those other guys open? Can they attack Iowa's linebackers in some crossing routes? And will Deckers have enough time to be able to get through all those reads? Iowa State's offensive line, they move some pieces around. Their best offensive lineman is at center. And I think Downing's a good player, but we saw last year with Iowa, you can have a great center and not a great offensive line. So Iowa, I think, still could be able to generate some pressure for him, and then also make it tough on their running backs. I like their running backs. The guy I really like is actually their second guy, Eli Sanders. It's someone Iowa tried really hard to get late in the recruiting game. He visited Iowa and Iowa State like back-to-back days and ended up choosing Iowa State. So I'm interested to see. He's kind of a game breaker that has some really good speed, but it's also powerful enough to get through the tackles. So Iowa needs to be able to limit Iowa State's run game, and then I think the pass game will take care of itself. If you're forcing Deckers and that pass game to uh, make contested completions of more than 12 yards downfield, uh, I think they're going to struggle. But if you allow them to run the ball and be in 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4, all of a sudden then they're sitting pretty. They can kind of do whatever they want, and it just opens up all those easy completions and those plays where they can get their playmakers, just get them the ball and hope they do something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the it will be really interesting to see how maybe they use the pass game to open up the run game, and just if they can stay ahead of the change. We all know how important it is for Iowa, but I would argue, at least in this game, it's even more important for Iowa State. They're rolling out, 2 freshman kickers and their punter and whatnot. So, it's going to be important for them to get first downs, even if it's not the in a way that sometimes it isn't important for Iowa to get first downs. They just punt it away and they still come out with that hidden yardage advantage that Tory Taylor can provide. So to me, will both offenses be able to take what they can get? I think is probably whoever wins that is probably gonna win it, unless we see some really boneheaded turnovers like have existed in the last, I don't know, 5 years of this game. Somehow none from Iowa.
Isn't this just leading to just a painful experience for both fan bases to watch this? Like, you have Iowa that just nobody has any confidence in this offense being able to do anything, and you have Iowa State who is just, even if they have a lead, they're just going to be waiting for that big mistake, whether it be special teams or a turnover. This is just going to be, I just feel like it's going to be a really painful experience watching this game for both fan bases, unless something obviously really unexpected happens where one of the offenses all of a sudden generates a bunch of early first quarter points. But I just don't see that happening. I see both teams just really struggling to do much on offense, especially in that first quarter, as they're both trying to just get a feel for what the other team is planning against them.
Absolutely. And as we wind down that, I think the thing that, like, this time last week, I was thinking, what do I just want to see? And I wanted to see some identity from Iowa's offense. And now I don't even know. I think the thing I want to see is just what's the weirdest thing that can be dialed up. As Nick put in his prediction, Kirk Ferentz is basically David Blaine, just hiding and doing these weird stuff. We feel like he's always going to escape, but what happens if he doesn't escape from the submarine, 2,000 feet below the water surface? To me, I just expect such a weird game. I don't really expect much offense, as you said, and that makes it weird for me. Like, oh, what do I even want to see? I just kind of want to see the weirdness that can be developed from this game.
The big thing to me when I look at it is, like, if this defense can just limit any big plays. They got lucky last week on a misfire on a deep route where Merriweather got a little mixed up, but they survived it. It was an errant pass, and I say all the time, like, that happens in college football. Guys miss those passes all of the time. I want to see, some first downs. Obviously, a touchdown by the offense would be fantastic, but the defense probably is just as likely to score. I I do think I do think the offense is obviously going to really struggle, but I also think they're going to find a way to piece something together and get one or two drives that are effective, and then we'll see if the red zone offense has improved at all from the issues it's had. I mean, they've got in there once this year and they fumbled, so 0 for 1 so far to start the year. But can this offense move the ball enough, get a couple first downs when they need it to continue to own the field position game? Because the defense isn't likely to give up more than a couple consecutive first downs. So limit the big plays, offense get enough movement, enough first downs to be able to hold the field position game, and then do what Iowa really has done so well for so long, is take advantage of a turnover or two. Last week, I mean, minus 2 on the turnovers, and Iowa survived. No offensive touchdowns, -2 on the turnovers, and somehow won. That's a recipe that I don't know if can be duplicated, but I don't think you have to be far off. I think if that turnover margin is even, um, Iowa can survive in a similar game to what happened last week.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. It depends on how willing is Matt Campbell to play Kirk Ferentz's game, and can he be patient enough to execute that? Because I think if he just waits Iowa out, they probably got a chance in the end. Maybe they can even pull away a little bit if Iowa's offense is just that bad. Or does he press? Does he try and prove something with, Hunter Deckers maybe feeling slighted by not getting an Iowa offer? Jarrell Brock, that drama there. Does he push 10% too much? Because if he pushes, I think Iowa probably wins. And that's kind of what I'm expecting. That's what I've seen from Matt Campbell in this game. And I'm not expecting anything pretty from anyone, but I do think that, as weird as it seems, Iowa maybe pulls another one out. I know you're a little less optimistic in that range, though.
Yeah, I have no faith in the offense being able to do enough. I think the defense is going to do a great job, but I'm really sold on Deckers. I think what they had in Purdy in the past played into what Iowa wants so much, like his lack of arm strength, his careless decisions at times, just ate away at so many of the positives in Iowa State's offense over the last couple of years. And now you've got a quarterback who uh, can run a little bit better. Not that Purdy wasn't able to scramble occasionally, but I think Deckers is a better runner. He's got a much stronger arm to push the ball downfield. And to this point, we haven't seen him throw the ball like straight up in the air from 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage or even backwards, like Purdy had been known to do as well. So I think, addition by subtraction a little bit there in terms of, I think they have a better, more talented player coming in, but I also think that what he does physically uh, gives Iowa more problems than what Brock Purdy did physically.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Looking at how that game played out last year, and Purdy just really, really pressed in the second half, really the whole game, right? I mean, in terms of Iowa getting, I think it ended up being 20 points off of turnovers. And that would have won them the game right there, 20-17. But if Iowa State's able to avoid that, if Decker's ability to maybe make some of those throws turns it back in their favor, then it could be the first time in quite a while that Iowa has lost to Iowa State, and what a shame that would be.
I'm with you. What a shame that would be. The being able to hold, and you've mentioned, until I see Campbell, Fleck, Frost, until I see those guys beat Kirk Ferentz, it's hard to imagine them doing it. Part of it is, you said Campbell's it seems really pressed in this game over the last few years. Now, he did hit a trick play or two and some big plays over the time as well. But, man, until I see it, I have so little faith in this Iowa offense. But the part that holds me thinking that Iowa has a chance is just the fact of how Iowa State has found ways to gift Iowa wins over the last couple of years. Gives me hope that it could happen again, and maybe there's some Kinnick magic in the rain today.
Yeah, looking at the forecast, it looks like it's going to happen in the fourth quarter. Perfect time for a really weird blunder, Thad. So I'll go ahead and leave that there. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Thad. Any closing thoughts?
Just embrace the weirdness that is going to be, I think, this Iowa football season, and hope the defense, I think, enjoy the defense, enjoy the punting, and if there's a first down or, heaven forbid, a touchdown in there, celebrate, because who knows when it'll happen again.
I know. That's definitely where I am. So thanks, Thad, for joining. This will be on the podcast feeds for those who missed it, and maybe YouTube. We'll see. But for Thad Nelson at Harrison Star, the coffee run for Iowa State is now over. Thanks, everyone.